Resident Evil Village, Winter's expansion size on PS5 revealed. We now know how big Resident Evil Village's DLC Winter's expansion will be for the PlayStation 5. As some fans have seen on the console preview, the DLC will be a massive 6.997 gigabytes. That adds to the 28 gigabytes that the base game already has, and it's the kind of DLC that you have to decide you really want to play. The upcoming Resident Evil Village DLC Shadows of Rose will introduce horrifying new enemies for Rose Winters to face on her survival experience. Resident Evil Village's new DLC, Winter's Expansion, will end the Winters family saga, according to Capcom. Capcom director Kento Kinoshita told IGN at Tokyo Game Show that the Shadows of Rose portion of the DLC will wrap up the family's story. A new trailer for the Resident Evil Village expansion, Shadows of Rose, teases brand new and terrifying foes for players to face. The upcoming DLC will take place 19 years after the events of the main game, with Ethan Winters' daughter Rose serving as the protagonist. Capcom has teased that the difficulty in Resident Evil Village, Shadows of Rose will be higher than the base game, and new horrific monsters will no doubt play a role in creating that difficulty. Resident Evil Village was very popular when it came out, and this DLC brings in a lot of great new features and scenarios in it, so most players will probably decide they do want it. For starters, the DLC will add a third-person mode. Of course, it's a way to make playing through the game easier, particularly exploring 3D space, so what may be a novelty for some can be an accessibility aid for others. For Mercenaries Additional Orders, you will get your pick of several characters for new scenarios. The key character here would be Lady Dimitrescu, as she can build up a thrill meter using her attacks. When the thrill meter fills up, she can summon her daughters, throw furniture, or hit enemies with a slam. As the literal breakout star of the game, many players will be buying the DLC just for this opportunity on its own. Also playable will be series mainstay Chris Redfield and Lord Karl Heisenberg. Chris is coming in to give players that classic Resident Evil experience, packed to the teeth with weapons and ready for this fight. If he strikes enemies instead of shooting them, Hudson build up his onslaught meter, which when activated gives him super speed, including for reloading. Karl Heisenberg has his magnetic abilities, alongside lightning strikes and giant hammer. Capcom producer Masachika Kawada declined to comment to IGN about what that future holds, saying Capcom could absolutely not talk about the next step for the franchise. Resident Evil Village put a more action-oriented spin on the first-person gameplay introduced in RE7, and now Shadows of Rose will make additional changes to the formula. The entire expansion will be played from a third-person perspective, making the DLC feel similar to the modern remakes of Resident Evil 2 and 3. Rose Winters' supernatural powers will also play an essential role in both the story and gameplay, complementing the typical arsenal of Resident Evil weapons. Shadows of Rose is set to make various changes to Resident Evil Village gameplay, and new creatures will help keep players on their toes. Finally, there is Shadows of Rose, an extension of the original story where you play as Ethan Winters' precious daughter, now a 16-year-old Rose Winters. Rose finds herself in the consciousness of the Megamycete, armed with a gun, some medicine, and bullets. However, Rose herself is her own living weapon. Previews show her using a freezing ability that has the flexibility to be used offensively or defensively. Rose faces some new enemies for the franchise, including the Face Eater. As you can imagine, this nasty ugly is best avoided, as when it gets its hands on you, it will start sucking the life out of you. The long wait for Winter's expansion is ending soon. Winter's expansion will be released on October 28 for Xbox Series X, Series S, Xbox One, PlayStation 5, PlayStation 4, and PC. If you bought Resident Evil Village Gold Edition, it will automatically be added to your version of the game. Shadows of Rose, one part of the Village DLC coming October 28, is set 16 years after the events of Village, when Rose Winters learns about herself and her strange powers. Ethan Winters, Rose's father, first appeared in the Resident Evil franchise in 2017's Resident Evil 7, Biohazard before returning for Village. His wife and Rose's mother, Mia, appeared in both games, too. A new trailer for Shadows of Rose, posted to Twitter by Resident Evil, hints at some horrifying new monsters coming in the expansion. The trailer outlines the Winters family saga, with Ethan venturing to save his daughter 19 years before she embarks on her own adventure. A clip sees Rose use her supernatural powers to fend off a monster, and then another grotesque foe is seen shambling past her. This grotesque creature has a shackle clamped around one leg, and it carries a massive rusty mace as a weapon. With the Resident Evil Village DLC set to be even more difficult than the base game, this mysterious menace will no doubt be completely terrifying when players encounter it in Shadows of Rose. The Winters expansion includes a lot more, including a third-person mode for the main game. There will also be new content for the Mercenaries mode with playable Chris Redfield, Heisenberg, and Lady Alcina Dimitrescu, as well as a multiplayer spin-off called Resident Evil Re-Verse. All of this is coming October 28th as part of Winter's expansion. Resident Evil Village, Shadows of Rose will have some horrific creatures. While Resident Evil Village stars Rose and Ethan Winters throughout the base game and DLC, Shadows of Rose will apparently serve as a conclusion to the family's story. The Winters were first introduced in Resident Evil 7, with Ethan fighting to find and save his wife Mia from the Baker family. Village then saw the hero journey to save their daughter Rose, who had been kidnapped and taken to a bizarre European village. With Shadows of Rose concluding this saga, it remains unclear who Resident Evil 9 will focus on instead. Resident Evil Village managed to deliver an intense first-person experience, and now Shadows of Rose is set to bring the horror to an entirely new perspective. The expansion will give Rose Winters powerful abilities, but terrifying new enemies will put her survival skills to the ultimate test. Set for release on October 28th, the Shadows of Rose DLC will add even more evil to Resident Evil Village. Resident Evil Village was released in May 2021 for Google Stadia, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Windows PC, Xbox One, and Xbox Series X.